So as you can see from the sign behind me, I'm standing in front of St. Ruprecht's Church. This is not actually the church. This is actually a relief sculpture built in 1956, so kind of, I don't know, sort of get the dreary mid-century thing happening. The reason why this was built in 1956, of course, is that much of Vienna was bombed during the war, so this is one of those buildings that they rebuilt, not least because this was Gestapo headquarters sort of right in front of me, and so obviously that was a big bombing target. So you can see that over there. Now it's a park. Anyway, so back to our church here. So we're circling around this big guy here is meant to indicate that we are standing very close to this church. And unlike this building here that I just showed you, this church was built possibly as early as 740. Right, which makes it the oldest standing church in Vienna. And we definitely know it's the oldest standing church in Vienna, but we don't know for sure it's the oldest one. Legend and tradition has it that it is the oldest one, but there were in fact some graves and some other foundations that have been found under St. Stephen's Cathedral and a couple of other churches that leads people to think that perhaps there were older churches here in Vienna, but this is certainly the oldest surviving church. And this church was in the middle of the old Roman encampment. So what happened was, after the fall of the Roman Empire, the sort of tribes and wandering civilizations from the east came in, and they destroyed the old Roman encampment, and on the ruins a medieval civilization sprang up, and this was at the heart of that civilization. Now, this church was not only a place of worship, it actually served a very important sort of business/social function. It was called the Salzamt, which means the salt office. And this is where the merchants would bring the salt from Salzburg, right, and they would unload it on a jetty out in the Danube, which is right sort of in front of me here. You can't really see it, but you can kind of see that there's a gap in the buildings, and that's where the Danube Canal is. So you can see that this is really close here. And then they bring it up to this church here, and that's where they would distribute it to the individual retailers who sold the salt. Right? And for us, salt is kind of not that big a deal. We go and we buy it at the supermarket, but for them, in the Middle Ages, it was the basis of their entire food system, because it was basically the only preservative out there, because sugar in those days was quite hard to get and very difficult to process because we didn't have any sort of modern processing methods. So salt was really the only preservative. So you might think that salt had the role in their food system that was something equivalent to the role of corn in ours. Like it was sort of unimaginable without it. So this was a very important church. And so this is where all the salt would be brought and they would distribute it. And so that's why it's named for St. Ruprecht, because St. Ruprecht is one of the founders of the city of Salzburg. The city of Salzburg was based on old salt mines from the Hallstatt civilization in the 6th to 8th centuries. And so when he was canonized, he became the patron saint of the salt merchants, and that's why they named the church after him.